start with Joris first. Yeah, Joris, please go ahead.
So I'll just introduce Joris' title. His title for the paper title for today is The Role of Digital Platforms in Re-Victimization of Gender-Based Violence Survivors. Dr. Fomba Tala Joris Joel is a senior researcher at University of Yaoundé, Cameroon. Joris, please go ahead. You have 7 minutes to present your paper. Please go ahead.
Thank you. My research, this research on the role of digital platforms in re-victimization of gender-based violence survivors explores the role of digital platforms in the re-victimization of survivors of gender-based violence, as technology continues to play an integral role in modern society. The interaction between survivors of gender-based violence and digital platforms raised critical concerns. This study delves into the mechanisms such as social media, online forums, and other virtual environments can exacerbate the trauma experienced by survivors. The papers highlights both the positive and negative implications of digital spaces, analyzing how these platforms can be used as tool for empowerment, while also saving as avenues for future abuse, surveillance, and harassment. This paper discusses the risk of online re-victimization and proposes strategies for protecting survivors while promoting digital safety. In my research, my findings is my first finding is that the type I identified the types of online abuse experienced by survivors. The research found that survivors of digital-based violence often encounter various forms of digital re-victimization, including cyber stalking and surveillance. Perpetrators use social media to monitor survivors' activities and intimidate them. Second, non-consensual image sharing. Survivors report instances of intimate images being shared without consent as a means of control or humiliation. Trolling and online harassment. Survivors are subjected to cruel comments, tweets, and targeted harassment, particularly when sharing their stories and seeking justice. Impact of the online re-victimization on survivors. The emotional and psychological toll of re-victimization on survivors is significant. Many survivors report experiencing heightening anxiety, depression, and feelings and powerlessness. For some, the online abuse can lead to a desire to withdraw from digital spaces altogether, reducing the ability to seek support on access resources. Gaps of legal protection, despite to growing prevalence of online abuse, there are notable gaps in legal protections for survivors of digital re-victimization. Many survivors reported that when they saw legal recourse. The responses were often inadequate or slow. Not and many survivors feel that digital abuses is trivialized by authorities. The role of digital platforms in reinforcing gender-based violence. Digital platforms, despite the potential for social good, can unintentionally contribute that amplify content based on
Joris,
engagement.
hello, Joris.
Yes.
Joris, you're 5 minutes in. Please conclude in 2 minutes.
Okay.
Let
My
him take
recommendation
8
is
minutes.
stronger legal frameworks, platform accountabilities, support systems. In conclusion, I think the relationship between digital platforms and gender-based violence survivors is complex and multifaceted. Why digital platforms provide survivors with opportunities for empowerment, they also present new risk of revictimization. Addressing this risk requires comprehensive effort from both legal authorities and tech companies, as well as continued advocacy for survivors' rights in digital spaces. By enhancing protections and fostering safer online environments, digital platform can become spaces of healing and solidarity rather than sites of harm. Thank you.
Thank you, Joris. That was excellent to highlight the importance of, the public extension of the digital realm and how it can lead to the withdrawal, which is a big loss of access. Now we'll go to the next presenter, which is Trishula, who's a junior research associate at the Organization for Research on China and Asia, ORCA. A title of the paper is Love and Logins, Stratified Intimacies in India's Digital Dating Cultures. Go ahead, Trishula.
Timer, so I don't go on board. Yeah, so my paper basically focuses on how digital dating has transformed the landscape of intimacy and romantic relationships in India. We've seen from Tinder to Bumble to even niche platforms such as Isle or Truly Madly, where online dating apps have constantly configured traditional matchmaking, offering a space where individuals can navigate love, desire, and even companionship in a supposedly modern and autonomous manner. But my paper uh, is in the realm that where the research is on that despite the promise of this progressiveness and digital platforms are not neutral spaces. Instead, they are embedded in India's very deeply entrenched structures of caste, class, gender, and heteronormativity. And this paper examines digital dating in India through a decolonial lens, challenging the narrative that these platforms democratize these spaces. I think we come to talk about how the other dating avenues that used to be there, like parks or like common spaces, have been capitalized upon, and all of these have been looked down upon, where we've put ourselves in a narrative of subscribing to these platforms in order to find love. So if I want to take you a little back, like even feminist scholars like Sharmila Raj or Meena Gopal, they highlight that the constructivities of desirability in India are intrinsically linked to all these hierarchies. And these hierarchies are not just reflected, but the algorithms in these apps actively reproduce them, which privileges certain bodies, certain languages, certain aesthetic markers that inevitably it ignores the other people from getting the same kind of access on these platforms. And like online dating platforms in a very post liberal India does promise departure from the traditional core an arranged marriage, but where individuals can exercise greater agency. But there's always a double standard that legitimizes male sexual assertiveness, while demanding that the women carefully curate the desirability, even with the confines of a very cultural actability. Is I could be attractive, but not overtly sexual, independent, but not too assertive. So there, but after every moment that's going to link to this platform, and this is a tether that women have to navigate in these platforms, and popular culture further worsens these constraints by shaping expectations and sexuality. For example, Bollywood, even the mainstream cinema in the South has historically constructed binary representations of women where just nothing beyond don't contribute to the plot. And I think, in a way, my research that dating sphere may also reinforce these narratives where women are expected to be recipients of what's being unleashed on platforms rather than being made to sexual agency, or instead they just get labeled too forward or undesirable, where they conform to and they have conformed later on to additional expectations to be deemed more suitable for a long-term relation. And harshly from Yale, he proves that this bifurcation echoes larger anxieties about a woman's mobility and modernity, because when the sanctum sanctorum of patriarchy is placed in a woman's womb, it's hard to move away from that, no matter which app that you go to, because the people on these apps subscribe to these kind of notions. And while they look at these apps as a kind of independence that the promise of online dating is tempered, but it is by and within the persistence of social structures that dictate it. And the this entire digital configuration is also highly tied to the kind of education, employment, and the urban residency that dictates one's positioning on these platforms. And this commodification of modernity, which these apps present, where we have to subscribe or pay money to get to kind of choose which religion you want or which language that you want, or even certain places where you can put forms of what kind of. So I've come across in the research a lot of profiles where, oh, in case you pay extra money and then you go select golf or something, you are subscribing to a different kind of plethora of people there, and it's very inevitable as to who can afford that in the first place, right? So, and if this is what Bumble is advertising, and if this was even truly, even apps like Truly Madly, who claim to be very liberal in their notion, are subscribing, it doesn't really solve the problem of it. And there's also an age intersection that comes because my
Trishla, please
who
conclude
were
in the next 2 minutes.
Mumbai.
Trishla, am I
Yeah,
audible?
sure. I'll wind this up. Yeah. So my paper, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, perfect. So my paper also looked at the queer men in Mumbai, and where how older men in fitness, self-improvement, or the alpha male coaching monetize their perceived wisdom or modern. And of course, we've seen time and time again, like platforms like YouTube, TikTok, and LinkedIn, for example, which I would place in the same realm as Hinge, gives nothing but takes more of your time. Instead, maintains a social and economic relevance by positioning themselves as digital mentors and lifestyle guides. And we see there is uh, I think the recent example, when I probably I wouldn't want to quote here, we could see there is a strong contention between people who subscribe to these apps and who become famous because of these apps and have an audience, and to traditional media who find that their audiences are dwindling. And you're able to see how there's a narrative pushing where you push that anybody who does subscribe to these platforms or to these people, I think the direct way is to character annihilate them. And I think in our recent political environment, that's been a time and again proven to be true. So I think everybody knows of an example as to what I'm hinting at. So yeah, so these apps uh, truly moving forward, if you have to see them as a truly decolonial approach to conclude, um, designing these algorithms uh, does does not in a way exclude the biases that come with it, because it is done by humans who inherently come with these, and AI if people do talk, oh, maybe AI can inhibit all these changes, it will not, because at the end of the day, we have also had studies now that are coming up that have proven that Chat GPT or even DeepSeek, when it comes to creating an image or something like that. So it has to be to create online safer spaces for marginalized users. The apps need to actively challenge these notions of caste class based exclusivity. And without such intervention, and digital laws and digital dating in India will always continue to operate as a possibility for, and is a possibility as a space for profound exclusion, mirroring the very structures they claim to disrupt and also rob you in the way. So yeah, that's where I end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Trishla. That was very interesting that, the false claim of neoliberal free market is not really free, and the filters that they already exist are reinforcing the pre-existing prejudices and biases. Now, the next presenter is Sukanya Mitra, who's a research assistant at Vishwa Bharati and TIS Mumbai. The title of her paper is AI-Mediated Leisure, Agency Commodification and Aestheticization in Public-Private Spaces. Go ahead, Sukanya. We
Thank
can
you.
see your screen. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. So today my topic is AI-mediated leisure, agency commodification and aestheticization in public-private spaces. So to begin with the leisure and the AI technology, we'll first look into the historical conceptualization of leisure, which was normally covered cultural norms, gender roles, societal expectations, and in some cases, agency accessibility of it. And now with newer technology, AI-driven platforms or personalized entertainment apps, it's basically algorithmically curated social media, and it has refined leisure by blurring public-private boundaries and offering women safer and more accessible recreational alternatives. Like we can talk about Facebook or YouTube or Instagram, Netflix, Hotstar, anything. But if we see the structural influence of AI-mediated leisure, we always see that there is a particular algorithm which is working. There is particular platform policies and amongst all digital surveillance, which is very much there, right? So while AI enables increased participation and personalization, we basically need to understand that it's simultaneously perpetuates structure of control or the visibility or how we commodify each platforms, right? So I have put certain pictures for the ethical thing. I have tried to put this in hide, but these are some of the channels, Facebook groups, which is there, and it's been very popular, like Probashe Gharkonna or Ononna Rannaghar. I have particularly chosen this Bengali groups because what happens for the Bengalis that there is certain kind of language barriers which are there. And when you are producing some contents or videos which is basically in Bengali, then there is a problem that you won't be able to reach the larger amount of people and the audience through which you'll get your subscriptions or star markers and everything, right? So this is one of the, we would say, agency that's working in social media. So while searching the literature, I found that leisure as a gender experience, it has been talked for ages, and there initially we saw how men used to access the public sphere for leisure, like gentlemen's club or cigar lounges, barber shops or bars, pubs, etc. But now with women's participation, it has restricted due safety concerns and domestic responsibilities. Women always tends to choose better or safer options, and it mostly covers the public realm only, not the private sphere or not the offline real world. So that's why I put the public-private duality in AI-mediated leisure is one of the big concern when we are talking about leisure spaces. And AI has blurred the traditional boundary between public and private leisure spaces and opening YouTube channels or Facebook groups, because I have seen during my master's dissertations that women, they have so much to do in their regular household chores that they don't get much time to spend on their leisure. So there comes, how can they do that while cooking? So then we saw that how women are opening their YouTube channel or Facebook groups and posting contents and videos on cookings or their daily lives, right? That. So commodifications of leisure in digital spaces, it basically arrives when AI monetizes digital leisure. It gives us or the women empowerment through monetizations, and they can gain their sustainability from that. But at the same time, AI-driven leisure exists within broader systems of power and regulate digital experiences, but it increases accessibility, which is very important for women who don't get to prove themselves, who don't get to, explain or explore their options. But yes, there are certain research gaps which I found that limited intersectional analysis. I have tried to cover the women's perspective on it, but there are certain other kinds of intersectionalities of technologies, and I couldn't cover the aging part in the leisure. And there are certain gaps in AI and gender research beyond work and surveillance, because there are certain kinds of threats that goes on. There are certain kinds of trolling that goes on, which I couldn't cover. And the empowerment versus reinforcement of norms is another topic which could cover another 7 minutes probably with the presentation. So my research objectives are to analyze how AI-driven platforms reshape women's leisure experiences in digital environments, investigate the implications of AI-mediated leisure on gender agency and autonomy, to examine the dual nature of AI leisure as both liberating and constraining for women, to explore how AI-driven leisure compares to traditional physical leisure spaces, and finally to contribute to discussion on the commodification of leisure in AI-mediated environments. For methodology, I have chosen qualitative research approach and the thematic analysis. I have taken certain secondary resources and I've tried to focus on the general experiences and tried to cover the narratives of them. And for the
Kanya,
theoretical,
please wind up in 2 minutes.
so theoretically, I have used Habermas's public-private dichotomy and Nancy Fraser's multiple publics concepts. In the analysis, we would say that AI-mediated leisure, its accessibility and control has been maintained through different public-private boundaries and barriers, algorithmic regulations, filters, contents, limiting user agency, and shaping digital experiences. Reinforcement of gender norms is another important thing, which we find out that AI-driven leisure often reflects societal biases, promoting content aligned with traditional feminine roles. And comparison to physical leisure spaces, we always see that traditional leisure spaces enable public engagement, but pose safety and mobility challenges for women. So AI-driven platforms monetize leisure by tracking and analyzing user interactions. Commercialization of leisure raises ethical concerns about digital agency and autonomy. And in recommendation, I would say that we should ensure AI algorithms promote diverse and inclusive contents. Educators, we should be educated in using AI biases and data privacy concerns, and strengthen policies on digital surveillance. And in the conclusion, I would say that digital leisure spaces blur these two spheres, as we got to know, and it curates limits women's agency, but it also monetizes digital leisure, which gives certain powers to women. And AI-mediated leisure offers opportunities for engagement, creativity, connections, and these platforms must ensure that they do not reinforce societal limitations. Thank you.
Thank you, Sukanya, for looking at digital space as a material space to look into the dichotomy of public and private, and in fact, extending the dichotomy into a triangulated perspective of the personal as well, public, private, and the personal, which is the intimate. Now we'll go to the next two speakers, who are Trinashri Ghosh and Dr. Neha Goyal, who are both assistant professors at IMS Unison University, Dehradun. The title of their paper is Exploring Desire, a study of non-normative sexuality and sexual practices in select Wattpad stories. Can you share your screen?
Sharing now. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope my screen is visible to you all. Okay. I want to introduce my colleague, Neha Goyal and Trinashri Ghosh, who we jointly wrote the paper, Exploring Desire, a study of normative sexuality and sexual practices in select Wattpad stories. Okay. Now, the gatekeepers of traditional media and publishing houses usually always prioritize narratives that align to a dominant societal norm and cultural traits. In regards to sexuality, this boils down to heteronormative, cisgender, monogamous relationships and modes of sexual expressions. Now, with the rise of internet and all the facilities it gives us, the emergence of online storytelling platforms like Wattpad, Archive of Our Own, that is AO3, and many others are centered on providing an inclusive space, transcending geographical and social boundaries. Now, these kind of online storytelling platforms are champion of user-generated content, content created by the users themselves, which therefore can challenge dominant cultural diktats that might be rejected outright in the otherwise mainstream dominated media or publishing platforms. Now, Michel Foucault, in The History of Sexuality, explores how society regulates sexuality through institutions, including media, the dominant moral codes that are, perpetuated by the institutions around us, the media, the publishing house, all are part of this. So in all of this, marginalized voices are lost like they are lost in other sections of the society, in other platforms of expression. Now, these online storytelling platforms are interactive in nature and allows readers to comment, to provide feedback, and provides real-time interaction between a reader and the author, allowing a truly collaborative effort and building narratives. And it also fosters community, particularly the marginalized expressions of sexuality, sexual desire. People who do not get a space in outside, mainstream media, builds a community around their, niche interests and finds others transcending, as we said, geographical and social boundaries to come together and give validation to each other and their shared mode of expression. Now, to analyze the select Wattpad stories, we have taken help of, or we have adapted Rubin Gale's Charmed Circle, and we have analyzed, or we have focused on the Wattpad stories in reference to this Charmed Circle. Now, the predominant dichotomy in the discourse surrounding sex often makes a distinction between what is good sex and what is bad sex. Even as social attitudes regarding sex has evolved over time, there is this tendency of sorting sex into good and bad categories, which further examines how certain sexual practices, the ones that we see in the inner circle in the PPT screen in front of you, they are the components that is traditionally ascribed to good sex, which is legitimized, accepted by the society, whereas those that falls into the outer circle is often either teeters to the edge of respectability or is completely disparaged. Now, Rubin says that sexual activity has formed the core of purity in most Christian-dominated cultures. And this is what has purviewed, or this is what has been perpetuated by the mainstream media and fostered again and again. Now, coming to the gendered discourse, we come to see that even though the outer circle is generally disparaged, a male venturing into the outer circle to a degree, if not encouraged, but is still accommodated by the society, whereas mainstream media provides almost next to no legitimacy to female venturing or female desire into exploration of this outer circle, which is what we have tried to find out, the existence of what we have tried to find out in the select Wattpad stories we have investigated.
Tinashe, please wind up. You have 2 minutes left.
All right. Okay. So, moving a bit forward, so the stories we have concentrated on are Sweet Innocence, Storm and Silence, I Sold Myself to the Devil for Vinyls, and The Client. All of these boast of more than 20 million reads, which is why they have been selected, and of which we see that only one story has been male authored, rest all three are female authored, which also talks about the general tendency of Wattpad stories, the majority of which are read and consumed by the not male audience. Now, these are the tropes and themes that we have focused on while trying to analyze and examine our stories. The first three, autoeroticism, casual sex, and promiscuous activities, are taken directly from Rubin Gale's circle of the charmed circle of Rubin Gale, whereas the other three, sexual assertiveness, male consent, and female gaze, are elements or components of sexuality that abounds, and we have taken to incorporate in our analysis. The first, autoeroticism and pleasure devices, we saw that particularly in two stories, The Client and Sweet Innocence, the protagonist is, in Sweet Innocence, the protagonist is a nymphomaniac, and she celebrates her want and need for sexual activity. Whereas in The Client, the protagonist, even though not perhaps, as rampant in a sexual desire as that of Sweet Innocence, is also extremely assertive and shameless in her acceptance of needing orgasm, in her needing love or love of the sexual kind. Okay. The casual sex and non-procreative sex is what most stories usually center around. Basically, since many of the authors are comparatively young, sometimes teenage or early tweens, therefore, a marriage is a component that features comparatively less in many of these stories, and therefore we just give one example of how the heroines or the protagonists in the stories go about informing their sexual relationships. Okay.
Nashi, please wind up. We can take this up
right.
maybe later on in the Q&A. Okay.
All right. Then coming to the conclusion, we see that in the stories that have been examined by us, Sweet Innocence and I Sold Myself to the Devil presents an interesting contrast, because the protagonist of Sweet Innocence, the female who is a nymphomaniac, is famous for this tendency of hers. Whereas the two protagonists, particularly concentrating on the male one, Blake, is also equally what traditionally we term him as a playboy, is however more accepted and is often celebrated within his school. Also, we see that the stories examined show that within the digital space of Wattpad, there is a relative space that gives some space to express female desire, showing female agency, particularly in initiating sexual encounters, that goes beyond them being just passive receptors of sexual advances, whether that is welcome or not to them. It also shows that female sexuality is not only highlighted as a central theme, but it is also celebrated, as we see in the comment section, in which comments go beyond thousands and shows an interactive celebration between the reader and the author.
Yeah. Thank you, Trinashri. Thank you, Trinashri and Neha, both of you, for very innovatively describing these categories and the way you are seeing it as a relative raw expression of the female desire, which is being excluded by the mainstream. Very interesting, and we'll take up more in the Q&A. Now, the next two speakers are Anjali Gupta and Dr. Umang Gupta, who are research scholars and assistant professors at Banasthali Vidyapeeth, Rajasthan. The title of their paper is Curated Femininity, Marketed Masculinity, the Commodification of Gendered Sexuality in Influencer Culture. Anjali and Umang.
Hello.
Yes.
Good afternoon. Am I audible?
Good afternoon. Yes, you are.
Yes. So I'll be giving my presentation orally as I'm actually traveling currently. That works, right? I hope.
Yes, yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I'll be presenting my research on how gender and sexuality are commodified in the influencer culture, titled Curated Femininity, Marketed Masculinity, the commodification of gender and sexuality in influencer culture. Sorry. With the rise of social media, influencers have become powerful figures in shaping beauty, lifestyle, and identity trends. But what does this mean for gender representation? Today, we see femininity being hyper aestheticized and marketed as a consumable product, while masculinity is tied to success, dominance, and power. Basically, the old traditional gender regime. This raises critical questions about the role of digital capitalism in reinforcing traditional gender norms and marginalizing non-conforming identities. In order to, before moving forward, I'd like to emphasize on why this research matters. Social media has redefined gender expression, making it more visible, performative, and monetizable than ever before. Platforms like Instagram, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, and Snapchat have turned influencers into powerful digital icons who shape how people see beauty, masculinity, femininity, and desirability. We can go as far as saying that nowadays digital icons hold the power to change the world and the citizens' opinions. Gender and sexuality are no longer just identities. They have become commodities that influencers market for engagement and sponsorships. The question that arises now is, are influencers freely expressing themselves, or are they just performing a version of gender that's profitable and marketable? Most importantly, it asks, how can we create more inclusive digital spaces that allow authentic gender expression without the economic or social constraints? The study aims to analyze how influencer branding strategies reinforce gender norms. It examines the role of platform algorithms in shaping gender visibility. It investigates how non-normative gender expressions are suppressed, and it explores how digital capitalism turns gender into a marketable asset. For the purpose of this research, research methodology that I have utilized is a mixed methods approach, qualitative mixed methods approach, where I'll be doing content analysis, discourse analysis on some case studies. So for the purpose of the same, what I'll be doing is I will be selecting the Instagram influencers, the most famous Instagram influencers on the basis of their following. So three from, I'll be categorizing them on the basis of lifestyle, beauty, and fitness. So accordingly, three influencers from each will be taken, 3 male and 3 female, and 10 posts of each influencer would be analyzed. So I'll be understanding the content that they post. Apart from that, I'll be understanding the discourse that happens on their posts. For example, I'll be studying the audience interactions, like the comments, the likes, the reshares, to understand how gender norms are reinforced or challenged. So I'll be also including some hate comments or backlash that the gender fluid or non-performing identity representations have to go through on reasons. So case studies are basically going to be called the case studies of marginalization, where I'll be taking influencers three female influencers, namely Masoom Minawala, Komal Pandey, and Neha Nagar. And for the male influencers, I'll be taking Raj Shamani, and I'm taking Ankush Bahuguna and Siddharth Batra. So all the have either work on beauty trends. The male influencers also have included who work for beauty trends, and they receive a lot of backlash. So I'm going to do 2 case studies of marginalization, 2 of curated femininity, and 2 of marketed masculinity. So that way I have subcategorized it. The reason for selecting Instagram is because Instagram happens to be the epicenter of curated gendered identity. It contains highly visual and tech-driven content. It is one of the most popular platforms in the Indian demographic, and not just the age group of young adults or teenagers, but even the all the generations are slowly moving forward the influencer culture with the utilization and proliferation of Instagram.
Anjali, I guess we're facing some
So what
connectivity issues here. Your audio is not in the meeting. You were not audible.
Hello.
Hello.
Anjali,
Yeah.
why don't you switch off your video and try to say, because we weren't able to listen to us last part, what you were saying. Just try to, in 2 to 3 minutes, try to summarize and conclude what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Am I audible now?
You are very much
Yeah.
audible.
Okay. So as I was saying, that I have selected 3 influencers from each. So I have taken a case study of marginalization where I'll be selecting male beauty influencers, and I have taken 2 influencers from male and one female who happen to represent curated femininity and marketed masculinity each. 6 influencers I've taken on that basis. A categorization has been done this way. The reason for choosing Instagram is because it is the most proliferated and most utilized platform as of now, as per the Indian demographic. And it can also be called the epicenter of curated gendered identities. So I'll be analyzing the interactions that happen on the influencer posts, the discourse analysis, and the content analysis of post. Furthermore, I'll be discussing how social media platforms commodify gender identities by making them marketable, and by censoring non-traditional queer or gender fluid influencers. So a lot of time the hate or backlash also leads to more profitable sponsorships. That is why also sometimes the algorithm turns the other way around and circles it back. I'll also be understanding how the line between agency and commodification has blurred with the influencer culture being promoted. I'll also understand how, and I'll also try to emphasize on how alternate or a more inclusive digital space is necessary to promote diverse gender identities. So to conclude, my paper would focus on the gender and sexuality as commodities influencer culture. It will try to understand and emphasize on how platform algorithms and brand sponsorships reinforce hyper-femininity and hyper-masculinity in cases, and how they utilize non-binary and gender-fluid influencers for monetization, and how there is an urgent need for an inclusive platform where there is more positive approach towards the gender fluidity or a positive gender presentation.
Thank you, Anjali. Thank you. And those are very pertinent topics and important initiatives to discuss upon. And I think we'll take forward this conversation in the Q&A. Hope you are still there until then. Now our next speaker is Ramsha Aveen, thank you. Ramsha Aveen, who's a PhD scholar at Jamia Millia Islamia. The title of her paper is Whose Idea of Pleasure? A Sociological Analysis of Female Sexuality in OTT Web Series. Ramsha, please go ahead. Oh, I think Ramsha is not in the room. Is Ramsha, are you still there? Is Pinky Mehta in the room? No, Ramsha has come back. Ramsha, if you are there, you can start your presentation. Is Aravind in the room, or Pinky Mehta, or Ramsha?
Ramsha and Pinky are supposed to.
Yeah,
Yes,
Ramsha
I'm
is
there. I
here.
just lost the connection in between.
It's okay. Now you can start it.
Acha, okay, just give me 1 second. I'm trying not to switch off. Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
trying not to switch off my camera because I'm facing some network issue. That's why I lost it in between. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ramshaveen, and I'm a PhD scholar at the Department of Sociology, Jamia Millia Islamia. And the title of my presentation is Whose Idea of Pleasure? A Sociological Analysis of Female Sexuality in OTT Web Series. So, when we talk about the discourse of female sexuality, it was always there in the Indian cinema. But in the contemporary time, we are seeing a paradigm shift from subtle depiction to distorted perceptions and finally to embodied female sexuality. Because for a longer time, Indian cinema has created a binary between a good and a bad woman, where her sexuality was suppressed and appropriated by the male gender, and it is only meant for conjugal relationship, that is for the process of reproduction. She's denied her agency over her bodily autonomy and sexual desire. But with the coming of OTT platforms and with their diverse storytelling process, and also because in OTT there is no censorship, so it has reshaped the portrayal of female sexuality. And the rapid growth of digital media has opened new spaces, which we have kind of created a newfound freedom. For example, we have web series, and I've specifically taken 2 web series, that is Love Stories and 4 More Short Please, where we say, these women are doing self-pleasure scenes like masturbation are there, they are exercising a sexual agency, and they are more sexually active and more vocal and unapologetic about their sexuality. But what is happening in between is that although female sexuality has gained more representation in Indian cinema and many stereotypes has been debunked, but it has created new stereotypes also. For example, it has presented a very narrow and exclusive idea of female sexuality, which is it is a lot of emphasis is there on the bold scenes to depict this. And by depicting the bold scenes, it makes us question that whose idea of pleasure, because it only appeal to a specific urban class elite audiences, which actually does not resonate with the larger chunk of population, because there might be and there is many women who are devoid of information or education about the concept of female pleasure. So in a sense, it has ignored voices from the less privileged sections of the society. Like, why don't we have stories from rural part of India when women doing self-pleasure? Do they have any kind of knowledge? Do they have autonomy, or do they understand that it is also one of the basic thing as being a women, like a kind of freedom which man also has? So we can say that it has ignored the intersectionality parameter within the domain of female sexuality. Also, sexuality, like it is only there, like if there is a film and they show a particular scene, so it is more of a spectacle meant for consumption. And what is happening is that due to OTT platform, everyone has access, like you just need a password and you just buy a subscription. So what is happening in this has created a kind of an image of women who are very hyper sexualized, and it has also led to over sexualization of women. And if you see the reception of it, like when we talk about the audience reception, if you see these heroines and the protagonists, they face a lot of trolling online by doing that scenes or by being part of that film. So it reminds us what Laura Mollett talks about, the concept of scopophilia, which can be defined as you're looking at another person and you're deriving sexual. Another person is is involved in a kind of a sexual activity. So it is very essential to incorporate the female gaze when you are representing. Also, for example, if you take the film like The Great Indian Kitchen, so it has represented female sexuality in a very nuanced and subtle manner. So it is not always that you show it in a very visual and hyper sexualized form, but you can always show more in a form of a conversation, women talking about female pleasure, and it also talks about, you can break that ice break which is there. And the idea of sexual pleasure is very subjective in nature. We should think about questions like, do women have that space to do these things? So these things are also, we have to look into the intersectionality things in it. And what is Indian cinema is doing, that it is providing a very highly exclusive and savarna idea of female desire and sexuality. And these female sexuality is appropriated by filmmakers for commercial gain to generate profit, because there are what happens in cinema, that certain themes become a trend, and then filmmakers thrive on the trend and they present it, and in that notion the actual sensitive storytelling get compromised. Okay, and this actually also reminds me of what Farid Kasmi talks about, the relationship between cinema and social reality or society. It says that cinema represents reality, but it represents reality only from a singular specific perspective, right? Means in the sense that they are
Ramsha,
not
please conclude in 2 minutes.
Okay. So they are not directly reflected in art, but they are changed as they pass through the process of meditation. So we can say that Indian cinema offers only a one way of seeing female sexuality. There might be other lens, there might be other perspective, there might be other everyday experiences of women who don't have the resources, or who don't have the space to exercise their bodily autonomy. So why don't we are bringing those stories? Even if you see the surnames of these protagonists and the kind of lavish styles they have, so it is very much convenient and accessible to them to represent female pleasure. But there are other marginalized communities also who have the desire, but they don't have the resources. So in the sense that Indian cinema must expand its understanding and portrayal of female sexuality to truly reflect its true diversity and multifaceted nature. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that paper, Ramsha. And I think very hardly Indian cinema, in terms of female sexuality, has passed the Bechdel test. That's the limits that one has come to. And these questions of caste, class, marginalized people are very pertinent questions. And we'll take them more in the Q&A. Now, the next presenter, and I think the last presenter in this session, is Pinky Mehta, who's a researcher at Indian Institute of Governance and Leadership. The title of her paper is Biopolitics, Surveillance, and Digital Governance. Pinky, you can go ahead.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, my respected faculty members and all participants present here. Welcome you all. I am Pinky Mehta and pass out Punjab University student, and now I'm pursuing higher education in governance and government studies from IIGL New Delhi. Today I'm presenting my new research paper on biopolitical surveillance and digital governance. Introduction. What is biopolitics? Biopolitics is a intersection of political and social sciences life where government regulate populations through policies on health, reproduction, and body autonomy to exert control over biological and social life. Sorry. Concept by Michelle Hogarth focuses on how government regulate populations. What is digital governance? Use of technology in governance, data-driven decisions making, how they interact government and use digital surveillance of control, ethical concerns about privacy and autonomy. Evaluation of surveillance, traditional surveillance, physical monitoring, CCTV, ID system, etc. State control intelligence agencies, digital surveillance, mass data collection, social media, biometrics, AI-driven prediction policies like post-pandemic shift, health monitoring, COVID-19 tracking apps, vaccine passport, and moment control case studies. China social credit system, AI-driven governance, rewards and punishment based on digital behavior. Aadhaar in India, largest biometric ID system, concerns over data privacy and exclusion. NSA and Edward Snowden revelations, mass data collection in US, ethical database on privacy and versus security, ethical and legal concerns, privacy violation, mass surveillance without consent, data breaches and misuse, legal framework, GDPR, Europe versus Digital Personal Data Protection Bill, India, need for strong global data protection laws, future for digital governance, decentralized governance, and with blockchain reducing state control over personal data, ethical AI in policy making, ensuring fairness and algorithmic decisions, balancing security and human rights, citizen participation in digital policy making. Conclusion: biopolitical and digital governance are reshaping modern society. Surveillance is a double-edged sword with security versus privacy need for ethical framework to balance power dynamics, call for responsible governance in the digital era. Thank you.
Thank you, Pinky. That's a crucial concern and a lot of keywords that one can work with into translating into a good paper. Now, I would request all the presenters to switch on their cameras and so that we can move into the Q&A session. I think there are a lot of questions already in the chat box. So Devansh or Shubhangi, whoever is taking the questions, you can go ahead with the questions. I would request all the presenters to switch on their cameras.
Thank you, Stephen. So starting right from the bottom, the first question would be from Anjali to Joris.
So Joris is not here. Joris is not
Joris
here.
isn't.
So yes.
Okay. So Yusra has asked Ramsha, do OTT platforms challenge or reinforce patriarchal norms when representing female desire?
Okay, thank you, Yusra, for the question. That was the main thing of my paper. Like, within the coming of OTT platform, we are seeing, a more direct representation, where women are owning their bodies, they are owning their desires. And, it's a kind of a celebration when we have, especially in the web series, like, for example, I've talked about Love Stories and Love Stories 2 and all these things. So, in a way, it has actually challenged that, a kind of submissive idea of female sexuality, because in a society there is always a notion that that female don't want it, they don't need it, they don't demand it. So with this coming of these thing, it has actually challenged this notion. But what is happening is that anything, when cinema represent any kind of reality or any kind of thing, so it is just not a one parallel process. There are other things also. What we talk about, that in every film there is also a subtext which is also there. So in that particular thing of subtext, when you are representing women who are very hypersexualized, okay, that's, we understand that. But it has kind of again creating a new type of stereotypes about women. Especially because I have conducted this study, and I have taken interviews regarding it, and through that audience reception study, they have told that by representing women in a very hypersexualized mode, they are again perpetuating a very ideology of women, creating an assumption that these are sex object. Because when people go and watch a movie, they don't be taken it as something, what you call female sexuality as something that they should understand female sexuality, that female also has a desire. No, they will take it as a kind of a kind of an entertainment activity, a kind of a consumption. Because normally people say that that there is a movie and there are so many scenes are there, so people watch it for the scene, people don't watch it for the theme or that sensitive notion that it is high time we understand female sexuality also.
Yes.
So in a way you can say that OTT platforms is doing both the things. It is also challenge it, but due to its challenging it, it also created a new kind of a stereotype. So it is important that instead of showing bold scenes or women exercising, self pleasure. Okay, that is one part of the story. It is high time that you show movies and cinema and web series when women are engaged in conversation, when they are they are engaged in a kind of conversation, when they are breaking taboos about female sexuality, because there might be women who don't find self pleasure very empowering. Means there are other things also, no, that female sexuality is a very multifaceted concept. It is very subjective in nature. It can maybe for one it can be a kind of a self pleasure, but maybe for another women it can be something else. So it is very necessary that Indian cinema has to capture that nuanced nature of female sexuality, which is actually unfortunately not happening right now if we see the web series and all. I hope I answer your question.
Yes, very much you did, Ramsha.
So the next question is to Professor Neha Goyal from Ramsha itself. She's asking, ma'am, could you kindly tell me what kind of methodology you have used for analyzing the stories?
Hello. Yeah, thank you, Ramsha, for the question. We have basically employed a method of close textual analysis, adapting the theories of Rubin Gale and her charmed circle. Though Rubin Gale has given the circle, which was not supposed to be gender biased, it was a neutral circle of sexual activities and how it is perceived by society. We have adapted it to the social fabric of how it is comparatively easier for the male to venture outside to the outer circle, while the female in all kind of traditional media and mainstream publication spaces have always been uh, seen as remaining within the, if at all her sexuality had been expressed, it has always remained within the safe charmed circle of Rubin Gale. We've also utilized cyber feminism's viewpoint in our textual analysis, which particularly talks about ways of expressing and exploring gender and sexuality in the online spaces, which is sort of a virtual safe space for feminist discourse and resistance and activism, which allows women to reclaim the digital space and create narratives that directly challenge the dominant and oppressive narratives of mainstream media. I hope that answers your question. We'll
Right.
be happy
So,
to
yeah.
answer for
Neha, so
any
tell
further
me one
questions you
thing.
might have.
Tell me one thing. In theory of the radical politics, which Rubin writes. Now that was written in 1980s, and this circle, the second circle of the man and the inner circle of the woman. And what we heard from Rashma as well, that in a way there have been blurring of boundaries through these OTT platforms. Do you think this circle in 2025, which the circle was made 45 years back, is really relevant in today's time, and how?
Yes, we think that even in a scenario of changing sexual practices and discourses, it is still quite relevant because coming to the conclusion part, one part of us, the conclusion was how the mainstream media, the publication houses offer little space for such stories, such narratives, which gives or which focuses on female agency in expressing her sexuality. Even in such cases where Wattpad stories, which have sometimes become so famous that they had been adapted by publication houses in Wattpad authors have gotten book deals or movie deals out of it. One famous example is the movie After by Anna Todd, which was actually which came out as a fan fiction of the One Direction band, and later became very famous after she secured the movie deal. Now, in all of these movies, including 50 Shades of Grey, which had published as a fan fiction of Twilight in another platform, we see that even if the story centers on, or at least the stories provide spaces for sexuality, it is the man who is taking agency. It is the man who is, the dominant one, so to say. The female is usually the passive receptor of such sexual practices, which might be enjoyed by her, but she very rarely takes initiative into actually initiating these relationships or celebrating it for herself. So therefore, we think that the mainstream media still provides less space for such alternatives discourses of female sexuality. And therefore, there is still scope for Rubin Gill and her charm circles
Okay.
theorization.
Thank you. Thank you, Neha.
Okay, so Stephen, the next question is for Trishla uh, by Joris. Joris asks, do you think there is a potential for dating applications which don't center caste, class, and gender of an individual? If you know any apps that currently do this.
Okay, well, thank you for the question, Joris. So for the truly decentered approach in India, like an ideal app would have to actively, I say actively because passive methods by any of these apps who claim to do so has not worked and would not work in a country like India where revenue of matchmaking apps are more than 4.5 billion rupees. And these kind of matchmaking apps have always tapped into the caste-based programs where you can always see them on TV, on or even on your Instagram feeds where these ads come, where there's just a caste name in front of the app and it actually becomes very popular and all these people subscribe to that. So active resistance is very important for these apps to navigate um, eliminating caste or class based filters entirely and encouraging profiles that highlight interests and values, while mainstream apps like Tinder and Bumble have not been able to navigate the space cleanly in this. But there have been apps like IL, which did actually start as a very elite selective dating app, but has actually positioned itself as a very inclusive, less marriage focused app. And also there is Field. It did that was something to started in the Netherlands, but then it was originally designed for non-traditional relationships, for sexual exploration, and it emphasizes inclusivity in gender and sexuality. But since it is an algorithm that was not exclusively made for India, it does not resist caste and class based exclusion. But there is something else that I also came across in my research. It's called Smoosh, which is a memes based platform where a lot of users on it do not even put their own pictures, but it's only about your mutual interests that get you into the circle, or your sense of humor or something you look for in a partner. Apart from these hierarchies that kind of let people to connect it, and the app has done a great job at recommending profiles that are very diverse in nature, even beyond the, if you don't click for a certain gender or something, the app has done a good job in recommending you profiles diversely across the spectrum. And I think for now, while that app is not taken that seriously, and anybody who's invested in a long-term relationship of course wouldn't turn to it because they do look at it as very a trivial thing, but it has become very centered and popular among college students. And for now, apart from these three apps, I don't think in Indian market there is anything that I would honestly recommend for anyone. So thank you for the
Yeah.
question though.
Yeah, quickly in 1 minute, just respond to this that these dating apps are also competing with the marriage market, the entire Shadi.com, Jeevansathi.com, and all of these apps as well. So when they have to do these kind of competition, they have to put in these filters, making it even more rigid and prejudiced. So do you really think in that free market they will be ever able to give the user any kind of benefit? Because they are looking for their own benefits, which is profits.
Yeah. I think yeah, they are tapping into the notion that people would invest in these apps. Why they have the location filters why certain, if you want to look put it into certain cities or certain genders, you have to pay more. And the fact that of course that men have to pay more to just like send enough likes, or if there is a clear gender discrepancy in that. While I have focused, and I am going to be focusing on one of these studies based in Tamil Nadu, where I am from, where we have caste apps like it doesn't subscribe to Bharat Matrimony, but they have like One Year Matrimony, Brahmin Matrimony, all of these apps that actually pull all the money from them. I think if dating apps, the appeal of them is in the process where it's about young people meeting young people and where you can't seek long-term relationship, and that is a kind of spectrum these apps are tapping into. And I think if you want to build an app in the same capacity, you would have to tap into a very niche crowd, and that is only possible in larger cities. And because in smaller cities there is no anonymity and you can't tap into, nobody's going to pay for that. So people pay for anonymity on these apps, and if that's being taken away, it becomes very difficult to navigate. Mainly, and I was also thinking about Tamil Nadu because we don't have an issue of the surname problem where you can't look at my name and you can't figure out where I'm from, which place I'm from, or which caste I'm from. But this becomes very difficult as you go up north, where people are able to navigate these caste dynamics. And it becomes very stereotypical in nature. So I think only in further of my research would I be able to figure out how I'm able to navigate these dynamics.
Sure. Thanks,
Thank
Trishla,
you,
for that answer.
There's a question for Sukanya by Afreen. Afreen asks, in what ways does AI-driven personalization contribute to the commodification of leisure, and how does this impact the authenticity of self-expression in digital and physical spaces?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question, Afreen. And I would say that AI, what my paper was actually dealing with, that AI actually helps people to create different channels and different groups to post their content regularly, right? But at the same times, it involves certain monetary transactions, and it's happening by the person who is opening the channel itself, because if she or he is posting certain kind of contents which the audiences are loving it, then they are involving much with these person and with the channels, and that's how they monetize these things, right? So that's how they create their they actually self-enhance their identity and their narratives. And at the same times, my concern was it's actually the authenticity of the content, or the algorithmic identity formations that is still there, because we know that if you are trying to search certain kind of contents in different social media apps, then there will be a algorithmic filter that will be happening, right? And that will going to portray or showcase you the similar line of contents you were looking previously. So that's how these filters work, right? So that's how I try to establish the what would I say, the concept of agency. That's how it is working. And I particularly I have mentioned certain Bengali channels on Facebook groups, because I have seen that in my personal life, that people who are from a little I mean, I would say that low class families, or they don't have proper education, or they are not very aware of how does things work, they face certain kinds of challenges when these things happening. Because right now most of us, we see reels and vlogs every day, but that doesn't mean that we are probably liking it, right? Some of the contents are in a way way that probably a aged person or someone, they won't like it, but they still will get this kind of contents regularly. And if you start seeing that happens with my father also, if you start seeing these contents again and again, so that will become a repetitive actions every day. Then he gets bored and he just screams at me that what is happening to my Facebook, why am I not able to see my friends, this that. But that's not how these AI technologies work, right? It's very funny to see these incidents every day, but I don't think so that they enjoy it that much. But we as youngsters, we can simply just deny these requests, or sometimes they give us the options like, would you like to see more contents in this manner, yes or no? So we understand what's happening, and if we are not liking the contents or everything, we just say that no, we are not interested, or no, stop showing these ads, right? So yeah, that's my point.
And did you have any comment to make? You had raised your hand. Did you have any
Yeah,
comment? Yeah,
yes,
please go
I
go
was,
ahead and
yes,
go
I
ahead
was
and make.
actually trying to ask this to Trishla, because it's her paper is very similar to my PhD proposal, what I am
Okay.
actually proposing. So my question was to her, because you're talking about dating apps and everything. So this is just an incident that I was working under professor of IIT Kharagpur, and there we saw certain kind of concerns where men specifically, they were raising that from dating apps itself, they were enrolling their names probably with pseudonyms. That happens, it's okay. But they were getting some kinds of what did you say, threats, okay, some monetary issues that happens, or they were get like fraudulence happened with certain profiles. They met the people, okay, in offline, they met the people, and then she started asking for money, this, that. So while you were saying about these dating apps, I wanted to ask you one thing, that see, in Bharat Matrimony or here in Kolkata, we have ABP weddings, this, that, they takes money. Shadi.com, they takes money like 50,000-60,000 they charge for, to provide you verified profiles for matchmaking. I mean, that would be like, that goes up to do we marry that person or not. But for dating apps, it's still in a very casual way, right? And people just say that it's casual hooking we are doing, and it's casually we are meeting people, but we take it casually, but that doesn't happen in real life when you face these kinds of challenges. And we as like girls and women's, we say like, we need protection, we need safety, as in International Women's Day, we definitely posting some things about that. But I was actually shocked when I got to hear these men who were raising issues, like they were being fraudulent and monetary cases happened, and even the people actually they filed FIR against these people. So how do we answer that? So that was my question to Trishla.
Cool. Before Trishla answers that, Devansh will take another question. We have another couple of minutes, like 6 to 7 minutes. So after he takes that, if we have time, you respond to that. Go ahead, Devansh.
Okay, so there's a question for Anjali by Jubi. Jubi is asking, Anjali, what steps do you think are important to create a more inclusive platform? Wouldn't such a platform play against the capitalist framework of such platforms?
And in fact, the caste and class question was not by Joris, which was asked to Trishula. It was also asked by Jubi.
Yeah, it was also asked by Jubi. It was a...
Yes, Anjali, go ahead.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Anyone?
Anjali, you are audible.
Yes. So thank you for the question. If we talk about more inclusive social media platform, so we can say that there can be multiple steps that can be taken, starting with having diverse gender options, where there are inclusive pronouns, or the option to ability and the option to hide and modify their gender fluidity whenever they wish to. Or the another step that could be taken is algorithmic fairness or representation. For example,
So the
in most
question,
of the
Anjali, is, so the question by Jubi is that, won't it go against the capitalist nature, which is trying to gain the best out of you and is based on biases and prejudice? So it's not about how to
yes.
make it, how to really, won't it go against the paradigm of the capitalist notion of the
Okay.
algorithm?
So one can say that it might go against, but if we look at it from an inclusive approach, so inclusivity is not necessarily anti-capitalistic, right? So if we go towards having an inclusive platform or inclusive approach towards, multiple genders, that might in fact enhance the, sponsor or brands and their customer base. They might have a dedicated user and customer base, because they are not just representing one or two genders, but they are also including those who are being misrepresented or ignored at some other by some other brands or sponsors. So we can say that a platform that will support gender diversity would attract a larger base, not just in the national context, but on a global level as well. It can create models that can neutrality or inclusivity, and it can lead to more loyal customer base. So brand loyalty anyhow will lead to a more empowered capitalistic approach of the brand in the end. So the end goal should not be an exclusive, biased, I think, model, but inclusivity will,
Hmm.
in a way, enhance capitalism. I believe that, and it can be
Okay.
promoted, it can be seen. So brands that necessarily are going towards a more inclusive approach are promoting, for example, male beauty influencers. They
Hmm.
are that they are actually gaining a more larger customer base rather than just losing the customers or
Any
audience.
examples of the platforms?
Any examples of the platform, if we say, so we can, for example, we can see that Nykaa also has started promoting for its fashion shows and for its events. It has also included beauty influencers as an essential part of its PR strategy.
Okay, great. Trishla, you can answer the question which was asked by Sukanya.
Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah, so I think a good start to answer the question would be to talk about the supply demand issue. I mean, of course, I don't want to commodify the entire dating process while talking about it, but it's hard to not when that's how the apps are being treated in the first place, and how entire dehumanizing the entire process is. And me and myself being in those apps, we realize what kind of issues that do come. And I think one of them is the percentage of women and men that are on these apps, and how these apps actively seek to charge the men for the kind of benefits for like premium, where let's if I have to talk about Hinge or Bumble, it's about the amount of likes that you can send, or to a certain diaspora that you can send your likes to. And also they have this AI model where it exemplifies your pictures, it pushes it has like certain hours, like for example on Saturday evenings or like Friday evenings, where it pushes your apps on certain people's profiles, so you can get access to these databases. So it at the end of the day, it's I think, and the amount of left swiping and right swiping that happens on these apps, and the amount of money that's taken does not equate to the kind of experience that they get in the first place. And because for men, let's say it's about you get like a few matches on certain days, and well, for women, probably every right swipe is a match. And as a human, that dehumanizes the kind of experience that you want, because it's practically not possible for you to talk to all these people. And that nullifies the connection that these apps actually promise at the end of the day, just because of this diaspora. And that does put men on a very disadvantaged platform when it comes to the monetary benefits that are actually reaped from them, from these apps. And while there are cases that do emerge like this, I think that's why more digital laws and surveillance would help in these kind of cases. But with our government coming up and not even recognizing certain kind of activities that subscribe to a specific gender, in this instance the man, it's not really helping, because you don't have any legal standings to take. And while a lot of women's organizations have brought this up time and again to talk about this kind of a conundrum, where dating apps have dehumanized not just it has dehumanized the sexual part of a woman and a monetary part of a man. And that hasn't turned out well for anybody engaging on these platforms. And talking from personal experience, it's been a very haphazard algorithmic misstep that these companies don't recognize in the first place. I think that would be a very good start, but probably they could always learn from apps like
Sure.
Uber and Ola that
Thanks. Thanks, Trishla.
don't work with
Thanks.
them.
And now I think I will conclude the session because we only have a minute to go. Thank you for all those lovely, brilliant, interesting presentations that were made in the Gender and Sexuality in Digital Realms session. I hope these ideas translate into great papers and we will be able to read it someday. Thank you to Devansh and Shubhangi for being the rapporteurs for the session. Thank you to the entire Sarojini Naidu Centre for Women's Studies for hosting this entire conference. And thank you to Professor Nishad Reddy to ask me to chair this session. Thank you very much. And now I think we will be moving to the next session.
Thank you, Stephen.
Do we have Dr. Abhiruchi Ojha here in the
I think she
Yes,
just
sir.
Zoom?
Hi.
Yeah. Hi.
You can hear me? Can you see me now?
yes.
Now we can. Yes, we can see. Is the rapporteur for the session here, Rukmani and Tanvi? I think we can
Yes,
start the
yes.
session then, Tanvi. Let's start the session. Okay, so Tanvi or Rukmani, whoever there is, you will have to introduce the chair and then chair introduces the speaker.
So we have Jubi as the chair for today, who is belonging to the Department of English, Jamia Millia Islamia. She is a PhD scholar, and she would be chairing the session. We have the co-chairs, Stephen, co-chair, not chairs. Stephen will be chairing, co-chairing the session. And there are rapporteurs. There is me and Tanvi Suman. We both are PhD scholars belonging to the same department. So here we have, over to you.
Thank you so much, Rukmani. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker for the day. Dr. Abhiruchi Ojha is an assistant professor at the MMAG Academy of International Studies, Jamia Millia Islamia. She completed her PhD in International Studies at JNU, where she was awarded the Indian Council of Social Science Research doctoral fellowship. Her doctoral thesis was on the dynamics of gender and citizenship in post-apartheid South Africa. Her latest publication is an edited book, South Asian Women and International Relations, from Palgrave Macmillan, Springer Nature, Singapore. So her publications have explored the linkages of gender, politics, and identity. She's also presently working on examining the intersection of gender and technology with a special focus on artificial intelligence. Thank you so much, Dr. Ojha, for joining us. We are looking forward to your talk because we know about AI, but we also want to know about the other A, which is accountability. So looking forward to you. Over to you.
All right. So as you can see, I'm really down with a very bad viral. So what I'll try to do is to keep my video off and share a presentation so that it distracts you a bit away from the voice quality that I have. So I'll start sharing, and there we go. Can you see the PPT?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, all right. So today, the topic that I have chosen for myself is building gender-sensitive AI systems, developing the 3D designer, development, deployment AI accountability framework. This is in context of much of the discussion that has been happening of late regarding artificial intelligence. And one of the reasons we were wondering, because AI has been there for quite some time in different ways, and we were wondering why is it that there's so much discussion now, and maybe that's because we have emergence of generative AI, and that's why people are sort of started discussing about it more, and the social and political impact of it. I've been working on AI for some time now. And we have been looking at the governance aspect of it in terms of technology. Do remember this picture that you have on your screen. I'll come back to it when I move on with the slides. So we know that every time that there is a technological revolution that happens, any technological leap, it really radically transforms the society. It could bring in positive changes in a society. It could also be disruptive to existing